So this weekend, I spent some time on MCP protocols, transport mechanisms. So there are two transport mechanisms in MCP. One is STDIO. So STDIO is more for local MCP server. You might not be using it if you are creating in enterprise applications and remote MCP server. STDIO is more suitable for where you need a local server. Let's say you want to connect with your cloud desktop. So the local server and the client will need to be in the same machine, right? The second one, the second transport mechanism is for a remote server. And recently, March of this year, MCP moved from SSE plus HTTP transport mechanism to streamable HTTP mechanism. And it is one of the, I'll say, major critical enhancement that MCP did, because the earlier SSE plus HTTP had some disadvantages or some inefficiencies while you stood up your remote server. I'll talk about those two. I'll talk about why this move to streamable HTTP is much better. We'll go through some theory and then go through some practical understanding of this move as well, right? So what is what was that legacy or the previous SSE plus HTTP protocol, right? So what was the problem in that, right? So the earlier SSE plus HTTP transport mechanism for MCP, for remote MCP server, was a one-way stateful streaming, right? And you need to have with this transport approach two endpoints. One is the /SSE endpoint through which the initial connection is established between the client and the server, and it is a long running and a persistent long running open connection, right? Through that, the server is pushes any updates to tools or any resources within the server. And it is also required if you want to have a stateful type of operation. For example, if you want to use the sampling primitive where the server requests the client to use some language model to sample request or to generate some response, you need that stateful connection, right? So that /SSE creates the long running connection, and then there is then the /message is through which the client sends a request to the server to get a response. For example, if the client wants to know what are the tools that this server is exposing, the list tools call will go through the message /message endpoint, right? So you need to maintain two endpoints. Second is the session needs to be sticky, right? Because the connection, the SSE ties the responses to that long-lived connection. So it needs to be a sticky session. So it is almost impossible for you to use a serverless architecture to use MCP server. Third is, even when there is it is idle, right? Even when there is no, let's say, server to client communication, the server keeps reconnecting with the client every few seconds, thus using unnecessary compute, right? And then finally, the scaling challenges. The SSE connection ties up the server resources, hard to scale under any concurrent remote users, right? Streamable HTTP, on the other hand, requires only one endpoint, which is the /MCP endpoint, and it supports both stateful and stateless connection, right? If I need, then I'll use a stateful connection. Otherwise, I can have my stateless operations where the server can handle an each request independently and terminate after response, freeing up the compute, right? And if I need SSE streaming, stateful, right, that also I can do. right? So it is most like efficient. You don't have to have ideal servers, don't need to keep your own connections open, and streaming is only happens when needed, right? This is the theory, right? Now let's see whatever we have just mentioned. Let's look at it from through a program, right? So having some practical understanding of this also. First, let's look at the SSE server, right? So I was mentioning that it requires two endpoints, right? One is the SSE endpoint through which the connection gets established, and the messages endpoint is where the client sends the uh, request to the server. So let me bring up this SSE server, right? So my server will be running on 8080 port, right? So this is my server. Now, if I go here and then say /SSE, you'll see this is the long running connection. Every few seconds, there will be ping, and you'll see that the server is running, right? So this is one endpoint, and then you have the messages endpoint also, right? So if you see if it returns when the connection is initialized, right? It returned the messages endpoint, right? So this is the endpoint through which the client will now um, um, post the request to the server, right? So let's take a look at it now. Let me start an SSE client, right? So this is my SSE client, right? Uh, I started my client. I'll start my client in this 3000 port. This is the IP address, and I have this. Uh, yeah. So in the server, I have this tool, right? Add tool, right? And the in the through the SSE client now, I'll do a list tools and see how it works, right? And I'll start this SSE client 127.0.0.1, and we'll see when the client does a list tool in the server, you'll see. So the server right now um, uh, exposed SSE, right? But when I call the list tool, you'll see that the client calls the MCP, // message endpoint, right? So let me start the server first, right? Or sorry, client now. So the client now is running in 3000 protocol, or sorry, 3000 port. If I go here, I created this as a fast API thing, right? So if I do the docs, I can see the list tool, right? So before I run the list tool, I wanted to go here. You will see that after the SSC, right, the messages, the connection to the messages is also accepted, right? So that means that it says that, okay, this is the endpoint. Now the client, you can use this endpoint to post your request, right? So I will try it out now. Get tools. It gave me the add tool, which uh, I have exposed through the server. And here, if you see now, it did a post message, right? And the list tool request, right? So this is why this is how the SSC and HTTP based it required two endpoints. And if you see the other server, like the server client, right? It is continuously running, right? It is pinging, it is the long running connection, right? So that was my SSC server, right? And we spoke about the pitfalls of SSC server. I now terminated both of them. I'll now create a streamable HTTP server. This is the upgrade that MCP did, right? So as I mentioned, I can create. So this is the code to create uh, a streamable HTTP server, where I created a first MCP based server. Stateless underscore HTTP is false. That means it is not stateless, right? If I want to create it as a stateless, so let's say stateless server, right? Um, Okay, no, so this is stateless HTTP false means it is stateful, right? So this is a stateful server that I'm creating, right? And I will start the server to 8081. And this is where I'll say what is the transport protocol that I want, right? Now, if you go to that run method of first MCP, right? MCP, if you see now, MCP has this stdio SSC, the previous one, and the streamable HTTP, right? If I say transport protocol is streamable HTTP, it will run the streamable HTTP async method here. It creates a Starlet app. If I go to the streamable HTTP app here, and then if I look at its handle streamable HTTP function under the handle request, you'll see it has the streamable HTTP has the methods to create either a stateless connection or a stateful connection, right? In the stateless connection, you don't need a session ID, but in the stateful, the session ID will be required. So the session ID, it maintains that stateful. The other thing in stateful request is you can also have event store, so which is optional, and you can um, store the events so that you can replay the events later on, right? So this is the server that will run now. So first of all, I'm running a stateful server, right? So I say stateless underscore HTTP equal to false. That means it is not stateless, it is stateful. Let me run this server. This server now is executing in the 8081, right? And as I mentioned earlier, now we don't need two different endpoints. There is only one point, which is /MCP. Let's go to my Postman and show you how to connect to that, right? So when I have a stateful streamable HTTP server, I need this post message. The first post message, and I'm showing it through the Postman so that it becomes very clear. All this thing like initialize the connection, then notify the connection is successful, and then actually doing the uh, post request to the server. These three are all abstracted into the streamable client of MCP. If you use streamable HTTP underscore client, it is actually doing this three, right? So here I created a streamable HTTP client with the server. This is the /MCP I said, right? That there's a single endpoint. And when I say list tools or call tools, if it is stateful, it does three post calls, right? The first one, it initializes the connection, right? So this is the server endpoint /MCP. In the header, I had to say that it accepts both application JSON and event stream, and the output is application JSON, right? And then when I run it, it will give me a session ID. Now this is a stateful, right? So I'll have to now accept that I got the notification, right? So that is this post here. It is the same. Okay, so during the initialization, the body had this payload, right? Where I say what is a JSON RPC version, an ID, what is a method, right? This is the initialize method. I'm initializing the connection. I'm providing the protocol version and the client info, right? And when I executed, it gave me a session ID, right? Now I need to accept the notification saying that, okay, the initialization notifications has happened, right? That is the next post message. For this, the body is like where I give the JSON RPC, the method is notification initialize, right? In the headers, I need to provide the session ID because with the session ID, now the state is mentioned, right? Whenever I use it stateful, I need the session ID, right? The other headers are same as I mentioned earlier. It needs to, it both application JSON and streaming, it accepts the content type like out is application JSON. When I run this, right? Oops, I did not. Okay, so I did not change the session ID. This is a new session ID, right? That I just created. If I run this, it is now the notify has been accepted, right? And now I can do the call tool with this session ID. So the call tool is here again, I say what is the JSON RPC version. The method is tools call, right? And the name of the function is echo because in my HTTP server, I have this echo function, right? So I want to call this function. So I have the method as tool calls. So name of the function is echo. And let's say it takes a string as a name, right? My name, right? It takes a message actually. So let's say I give a message saying, hello, Rajiv, right? And it will echo it, right? I need to, so this is the body of the in the like when I post, this is the body that I'm sending to the MCP endpoint. The headers, in the headers, I need to change the session ID. That this is the session ID that we created earlier, right? When I run this now, I should be able to get the message which will say hello Rajiv, right? This is what I get back, right? So this is how the stateful server works, right? So where I need this three calls initialize, then the notification that initializes happen, and then I do the call tool, right? If I want to create a stateless, let me go back here and change this to true. That means I want to create a stateless server now. Let me restart the server, stop and rerun, right? And now when I go to my postman, I don't need a session ID now, right? I just call the MCP endpoint, right? And in the body, I am saying that this is a tools call, right? Echo, and then say, again, I'll say, this time we'll do a hello world. If I run this, it will not require a session ID, right? So it ran, and if you see, it says hello world. If I do the like if I okay, let's see if I run it as a stateful, what it does, right? So let me rerun this with stateful, right? Let me create it as a stateful false. This is stateful server now. Right? Let me start it again, right? So now if I run this, right, without doing the initialization notification, since it is stateful, it requires a session ID, it will say missing session ID, right? I cannot use it without calling this too, right? So I'll have to first initialize it, or else the method is initialized so that I get the session MCP session back. Then I'll have to notify, like the notification message needs to happen that this server has been initialized. So this is my next call, and then I can do the call tool with that session ID. So with that, so in fact here we'll try it out. We'll just give the header as session ID as this. Oops, did it copy it? No, I don't think it copied it. Let me take the session ID, go to this one. Oh, sorry, it's in the header. I need to give the session ID, which is MCP session ID. Now, if I run it, it should work. Yeah, it gave me the message, hello world, right? Because in the body I had the hello world, right? So this is the difference between the stateful and the stateless streamable HTTP. That means I can do both a stateful and a stateless, and I don't have to maintain a long running connection, which I had to do with SSE plus HTTP. Right? That is what I wanted to show us as part of this recording. Thank you.